My Agenda is a series on Academy FM where we will be speaking to the Cabinet members at Shepway District Council to find out what their roles are and what plans they have for Shepway. On this edition of My Agenda, we speak to Shepway District Councillor for Folkestone Moorhall Ward and Cabinet Member for Property Management, John Collier. Born in Wimbledon in 1945, Councillor Collier spent most of his childhood in London before moving to Folkestone at the age of 13. He qualified as a valuer in 1975 and then became a chartered surveyor in 2000 following a merger. Councillor Collier won his first seat on Shepway District Council in 1979. Welcome to My Agenda, Councillor Collier.
Thank you.
When did you first become involved with politics?
It must have been at a very early age. I think it was approximately 16 I joined the Folkestone branch of the Young Conservatives.
And was there a turning point where you decided that's actually what you wanted to be involved with?
I think that having gone through that stage, I then obviously was developing a career as I grew older and married. I didn't have the time to advance my interest at that stage. It lay dormant for a number of years whilst I was making my way in my profession.
You did win your first seat on Shepway District Council in 1979, but then you did leave the council for a substantial period. When did you return?
Well, if I could just mention the 1979, I was fortunate in that I was actually returned to the council unopposed at that time for Folkestone Central Ward, and I was precluded from standing for re-election in 1983, having been promoted to a senior position with Dover District Council. At the time I was promoted to Deputy Chief Valuer and subsequently became Chief Valuer, so I was precluded from any furtherance of my career in politics until such time as I'd retired.
So it was when you retired you then moved back into politics?
Yes, I retired in 2001 and I then set up my own business which kept me fully occupied for 4 or 5 years. I stood for election in Park Ward for Shepway District Council in 2007 but unfortunately lost by 20 votes and I was again selected in 2011 for the Moorhall Ward and as we all know now I was successful on that occasion.
When did you become the Cabinet Member for Property Management?
That was May this year on the election of David Monk as the leader.
What role exactly is that?
It relates really to the furtherance, if I can put it in that way, of the council's property interests. That is ensuring that the maximum use and therefore benefit is made of the council's property assets, both in terms of maintenance, rental value, redevelopment potential, etc.
So would that also include social housing, for instance, the management of that within the council?
No, that doesn't involve me. That's a part of another Cabinet member's portfolio. My only involvement would be if any general rate fund land were wanted for social housing.
So you would be involved in the valuing stage of land, essentially?
I would be involved in the availability of the land which was held in the general rate fund as to whether or not it was the right decision to dispose of it for that particular purpose and for agreeing the price at which it should be transferred to the housing revenue account or such other account as was expedient to bring about the housing development.
Now you're also involved coastal protection and strategies. What does that mean?
Well, coastal protection is essentially protecting the land and therefore the sea defences from the sea, which is essentially beach management. And it's necessary, obviously, to move the beach around because the beach is moved by the tide, and therefore we have to reinstate it to protect the sea walls and so on and so forth. So coastal protection really is all that is associated with preventing any ingress of the sea onto the land.
Is that quite a large problem for the area? Is that something that really does need monitoring?
Yes, it is, and our engineers, in fact, don't only have responsibility for the coastline for Shepway, of which they don't have full responsibility because obviously there's the Hive Ranges. But in addition to that part of the coast of Shepway, there is also a responsibility down into Sussex and round into North Kent, where we have our engineers we as a council and our engineers have a contract to undertake the sea defence work, or coastal protection work there.
Now, if we could just go back a bit to property management. When there's been buildings within the town centre that could be said they're falling down, for instance, and they're certainly in a state of disrepair, if they don't belong to the council, what is the position in Shepway District Council for dealing with that? Do you have any involvement in that whatsoever if it's a private landlord?
Well, the situation is that obviously they're brought to our attention. I am, as a Folkestone Town Councillor, a member of the Folkestone Town team, and all these matters are referred to the town team, and it is really something which we seek to pursue as vigorously as we can through building control, and there is planning legislation which enables us to take action. But we are fettered. If the building isn't actually unsafe, there is really, sadly, very little that legislation permits us to do. Anybody who raises these issues can always be assured that we do everything within our power.
Because it must be quite difficult sometimes. Does everybody assume that it's the council's responsibility when actually it isn't, in essence? It's down to the landlords themselves.
Yes, it is. Obviously, we are responsible for ensuring that buildings are safe, but that is as far as we can go. We can't actually require a landlord to let a property or indeed to redecorate it or tidy it up. It is very difficult. We have an example at the moment, 1 to 3 Sandgate Road, which is the former YMCA premises, which is a temporary fencing around. I am told by the officers, and I've no reason to doubt that they have done everything possible. We cannot require them to remove the fencing.
Because it is actually required from a health and safety point of view to have the fencing there.
Yes, there does appear to be an element of irony, because obviously there is a requirement that they keep the building safe, and therefore by implication, if the building is safe, then why is there a need to have a fence? And this is actually something that I'm pursuing at this present time.
It's a long process, I assume.
Sometimes it's very difficult to actually obtain a response from people, let alone a positive response, because clearly if somebody has an empty property, it's not earning them any money, and therefore they're reluctant to spend. And more often than not, they're landlords who are large companies with no particular interest in Folkestone, and therefore the fact that a property is looking untidy and scruffy doesn't really concern them. They're concerned simply with their resources and the money that they're making available to any particular property.
Now, during the time that you were working for Dover and then coming back again to Shepway District Council, how have you seen the council change during that period?
I think it's fair to say there's been a dramatic change insofar as a lot of the functions of the council have now been outsourced. Therefore, to a large extent, we as a council are enabling these contracts to be fulfilled rather than actually undertaking the work ourselves. So as a consequence of that, of course, the number of staff has been reduced significantly. The other change has been obviously in the form of governance. When I was on the council before, and indeed working with Dover, they were using the committee system of governance, whereas of course Shepway a few years ago now changed to the cabinet system of governance, I think referred to as the executive style governance.
And does that make a big difference in terms of how a council works?
I think that it has advantages and it has disadvantages. I think that some backbenchers, and certainly when I was a backbencher until quite recently, feel that they're not able to have perhaps quite such a direct input as they would have if it were the committee system. That is a personal view and shared by some others, and others prefer to accentuate the positive, which is that the cabinet system enables decisions to be made more speedily.
Councillor Collier, if I can just ask you, what is your agenda?
My agenda, I think, is to seek to ensure that all council property is maintained and used to good effect, and in that we are obtaining the right income from the properties which we are letting out, that we ensure that they're being properly maintained by the lessees, and that any land which is not utilised is made use of in some way, shape or form. It's a difficult one, but I don't like to see land lying idle. If there's some sort of potential for development, and when I say development, I don't necessarily mean selling off for a developer to come in and develop. I mean, in the same way as the coastal park was developed by the council, it could be developed to provide facilities and so on for community assets, if you like.
For the community to use?
Yeah.
What are your plans for the future in your position as Cabinet Member for Property Management?
It follows on from that. I mean, it is to ensure that the council's land and property is used to the maximum effect.
And do you think it's quite a difficult thing to do with the economic climate as it is? Does that have an impact on the value of property and land in Shepway?
I think that there's always a good time and there's always a bad time to sell. But I'm not really looking at it in that respect. The last thing that I or any of my colleagues would wish to see happen is asset stripping. I think what we're trying to do is to maximise the assets that we do have in the form of development. So my agenda would be to pursue that avenue and to not have land or property lying fallow.
Councillor Collier, thank you very much for joining me on this edition of My Agenda.
Thank you.